a YouTube video. I'll upload this session to YouTube as an unlisted video and send you the link so that you can watch this afterwards. So again, we'll be going for the next 2 hours, and then next week, next Thursday, we'll have a question and answer session for an hour from 1500 to 1600. And this will just give you a chance to run any questions you have about your specific data collection needs that you couldn't figure out, or if we have any troubleshooting to do with anything that happened to you while you tried to collect some data, we will cover those kinds of things. So after today's session, I will be sending you an assignment by email. It'll be a PDF, and it's basically going to involve you repeating what I do here and doing a short data collection effort somewhere around your office or your house, and turning that in to me by June 27th, so 11 days from now. And the assignment, just to prove that you were able to complete the assignment, just involves you submitting some screenshots of the successful project. So I have specific instructions for how to do that I'll send you. I'll also, after this 2-hour session, send you a step-by-step instructions document with the detailed steps of everything I'm going to demonstrate, with some explanations along the way. And also that includes a series of 9 different short task-based videos. So if you don't want to read the step-by-step instructions, you can watch the videos. Most of them are 5 minutes or less for specific tasks in either setting up QGIS or using the QGIS plugin for merge and maps or the input app. So there is no course data to share with you because you're going to be collecting the data yourself. So in this course, we don't need to do that, give you anything. And you will get an official QGIS certificate. If you turn in your assignment, it'll look something like this. And if you're not familiar with that, the QGIS certificate program was set up as a way to support the QGIS project financially. So every institution, like my company Septima, that provides QGIS certificates, donates 20 euros to the QGIS project for every certificate. So it's kind of a little feedback mechanism for the QGIS project. So let's go ahead and get started. There are basically 2 QGIS related data collection apps. There's another one called QField that is developed by a Swiss company, OpenGIS.ch, and it's there's more similarities than differences between these. And this is just my personal preference is for input. I feel it's a little cleaner, and the data synchronization engine that comes with input merge and maps is fantastic, works really well. So that's why I've chosen to build this course around the input app, but I don't want to discourage you from investigating QField. They're both based on QGIS. And so both of them, for example, when you set up your QGIS project and you upload it to the Mergin cloud and bring it onto your input app, it will honor all of your QGIS symbology. The map will look exactly as it did in QGIS. So both of these basically end up being a mini version of QGIS that you can run on a mobile device to then collect data. And the input app is, and the whole Merge and Maps ecosystem is built by Lutra Consulting, which is a British consulting firm. And both of these companies do a lot of contributions to the QGIS project. So this is a schematic that describes the basic workflow that we'll go through. So most of the work is going to be setting up a project in QGIS today. I'm going to show you the most flexible way to set up a project. There's shortcuts you can use that I'll talk about, but the method I'm going to show you gives you the most options with data collection for setting up a custom data collection project. So we'll be setting that up in QGIS. Then we'll install the Merge and Maps plugin to QGIS. And I have and so when you do that, you log in with your account, and then you can use that plugin to push your project up to your account in the Merge and Maps cloud here. And then you can get onto your mobile device with the input app and pull that project down to your mobile phone and collect data. And then at that point, you can synchronize back and forth between the mobile device and your desktop QGIS project. And you can synchronize it both ways. So that works really well. So what you'll have to accomplish this is QGIS 3.2.2 or above. 3.2.2 is the latest long-term release. I'm going to be using 3.2.4 in my demo today, but you shouldn't see any differences between the two versions for what we're going to be doing. There's also an account you have to create with Merge and Maps, and it'll just be a free account. You can pay a subscription fee to increase your data storage with Merge and Maps, but the free account comes with, I believe, 100 megabytes and is more than sufficient to collect quite a few points. Then the QGIS plugin for Merge and Maps, install that in QGIS. And then finally, the Merge and Maps input app. And this is available for both Apple and Android devices. So that's another reason I like this system, is because you can use it no matter what ecosystem you're using on your mobile phone. So the Merge and Maps stack is basically, it's several things. It's a cloud service. So you create an account with Merge and Maps, and then you have this space in the cloud that you can use to store data and QGIS projects. And you can actually just simply use this to share QGIS projects with people. Even if you're not doing data collection, it's kind of a handy platform for just doing that. It's also a QGIS plugin, and the plugin will show up as a provider, a data provider in the QGIS browser panel. And you'll then be able to log in to your Merge account and see any projects that you have. And then it's also a toolbar that allows you to create a new Merge and Maps plugin or a new Merge and Maps project, or synchronize changes that have been made on the mobile device and bring them back to the desktop. The app itself looks like this. There's a green menu bar across the bottom. And here on the My Projects page, you'll see any Merge and Maps projects that you've set up. And if they have a little download icon, that means that it's a project that's up on your Merge and Maps cloud account, but has not yet been downloaded to your mobile device. If it has this refresh icon, it means that there's been changes made probably on your mobile device that need to be synchronized up to the cloud. The check mark means that it's in sync with your cloud account. When you you click on one of these, it'll open up the project, and then it will look as it did in QGIS with this kind of icon for your current location. And it will also give you your field of view, which way you're facing. The GPS point I'll show you all this when we get into that, but this will zoom you to your current location. And then you can hit the record button to record data. And how this looks depends on how you set up your forms for data collection in QGIS, but we'll walk through how to do that. So the basic workflow, again, involves preparing the QGIS project. So loading background layers, survey layers, styling everything, setting up your forms. And we can also set up map themes. We'll talk about that. And define which layers are going to be used for survey purposes, for collecting data, and which layers are going to be background, such as background maps. You can collect data as points, lines, or polygons. You can have multiple survey layers in this system. Then you transfer the project with the QGIS plugin for Merge and Maps up to the cloud. You then get on your mobile device, download it, collect your data, resynchronize it, get into QGIS, use the plugin to pull it back down. And it sounds like a lot of moving parts, but it's really intuitive once you start using it. There are some best practices that I'll emphasize as we go through this. Your whole project has to sit in a single folder. This includes all of your data and your QGIS project file. So that all has to be located in the same folder. It can't be dispersed. For background maps, things that work really well are XYZ tile services or WMS, WMST services. So there's a plugin called Quick Map Services, which is a really good choice for pulling in those kind of base maps. And then using the GeoPackage format for all of your data. QGIS does support collaborative editing, where you can share a project with a number of different data collectors. But that only works if your data is in the GeoPackage format. So the GeoPackage is key to the whole synchronization and version tracking that Merge and Maps does for you. And related to that, if you're going to have, let's say, 2 different survey layers, maybe you're going to collect sewer points and road center lines, then you would want each of those layers to be in its own GeoPackage. And that again just has to do with kind of protecting the schema for each layer, and if you do this, it ensures that the synchronization will work flawlessly. You can run into problems sometimes if you have multiple survey layers in the same GeoPackage. So just don't do that. And then as we go through the project, there's going to be a point where we want to distinguish which layers in our project are background layers and which are survey layers, those which will have data collected into them. Okay, so I'm going to get out of PowerPoint into QGIS and walk you through how to do a basic project setup. So I'm going to start by loading some base maps. I'm then going to create a study area boundary, a survey layer. I'll apply some styling, and I'll set up some map themes. And this will be basically so that if I anticipate being out in the field where I don't have a good cellular connection, I can set up offline and online versions of my base maps. So I'll show you how to do that, and you can set up map themes to tell QGIS if you're looking at the online or offline map theme, and the input app will recognize those map themes, so you can do the same thing out in the field. We'll then set up the data collection form with form widgets, and then go into project properties and define which layers are going to be used for survey purposes. Okay, so this is QGIS 324. I just have an empty project, and what I'm going to do is start out by loading some background layers. So I'm going to go to the browser panel, and it's actually a fairly new feature in QGIS that's goes back to maybe QGIS 318. Now, when you open up QGIS, this XYZ tiles provider comes with a global terrain data set and an OpenStreetMap data set. So these will always be there. So I'm going to just start by right-clicking on the OpenStreetMap XYZ tile service and add that to my project. And I'm going to zoom into my part of the world. I moved to Denmark last year, so I'm up in this little town here. So when you collect your data, you'll be doing it around your location. Okay, so this is the block that I'm going to be collecting data in. And what we're going to be doing here is a tree survey. It's kind of a generic enough topic that I think there's pretty much trees wherever you're going to be collecting data. So that's what we're going to focus on, is collecting trees. And I'm going to add another layer to this, an air photo layer. So I'm going to right click on this XYZ tile service and create one more new connection. And I'm going to add the Bing Maps imagery. And I provide you with this URL in the exercise document. Oops. Copy again. So this is the URL to the Bing Maps service. I'll click OK. And so now I have this new service here, and I'll add that as well. So this is aerial imagery. And at this point, I'm going to save my project. And I'm going to save this into my course folder. So I have a folder called course demo that I'm going to use as my project folder. Everything is going to go into this. So I'll just call the QGIS project course demo. And now what I'm going to do is create a new GeoPackage layer to delineate my study area boundary. So I'm going to go to the layer menu, create layer, and create a new GeoPackage layer. And I'm going to store this GeoPackage again in my course demo folder. And I'll call this study area. And I'll call the layer study area as well. Make this geometry type polygon. And I'm going to use my local UTM coordinate system for this. So you'll use whatever local coordinate system makes most sense for your location. I don't need to add any attributes to this. It's just going to be a rectangle delineating the area that I collect data in. So I'll click OK. And so here I have my new study area layer, and I'll put this into edit mode and draw a rectangle in the area I'll collect. So I'm going to focus on this roughly 1 block or 2 block area. Something like that. And I have my study area boundary. And I don't know if you've used the layer styling panel. This is a nice feature in QGIS for quickly symbolizing a layer. You can open it from the layers panel by clicking this open the layer styling panel button, or F7. And it opens up this panel that gives you access to all the styling tools in QGIS. And I'm going to select the simple fill component and just give this a fill style of no brush. So it's just an outline, and bump up the stroke width a little bit. So I have a black rectangle. So now I'm going to create my survey layer for trees. So again, I'm going to go, I can save my edits on this. I'm done with the study area. So go back to the layer menu, create layer. And since this is a survey layer, I'm going to put it in its own GeoPackage. I'll just call it trees, geometry type point. And again, I'll put this in the same UTM zone as my study area boundary. And I'm going to add several attributes to this. Before I move on, one note about the CRS, the coordinate reference system. When I added these 2 base maps, these are in the pseudo Mercator that most Google Maps and other base maps that are global are in these days. And so it's this EPSG 3857 down here. My study area and my survey layer for trees are going to be in my local UTM coordinate system, but I'm going to leave my map, my project, in 3857, the same as my base layers, simply because this prevents my cell phone from having to reproject those XYZ tile layers on the fly into my local UTM coordinate system. It's a much lighter lift for the input app to have to reproject the study area and the trees data into 3857 than it is to go the other way around. Okay, so I'm going to add a number of attributes to this. So the first one, since I'm doing a tree survey, is going to be tree species. And I'm going to make this a text field, add to fields list. The next field will be tree type. And this will be whether it's deciduous or evergreen. So this will also be text. I'll add that to the list. Then I'm going to add a column for fruit tree. This will be a Boolean field, just to be a yes or no answer, whether the tree is a fruit tree or not. So I'll choose Boolean for this and add to fields list. Next, I'll add one for circumference. And I'll make this a decimal number. So it's going to be a number, and instead of an integer, I'll choose decimal so I can add some decimal places to that. And I'll add one for taking a photograph. So you can take photos of your features with this, and those will be text fields because it's simply going to store the name of the JPEG or the PNG that was taken. So it just gets stored as text. I'm going to record the date that it was collected. So this will be a date and time field. I'm going to add a notes column. I find it's always a good idea just to have a catch-all column to note anything unusual that I don't anticipate when I'm outside. So that will also be text. And finally, collector. So this will be a way to hold the name of the data collector, me in this case. So I have 8 new fields added to this layer. So it's a geo package in my course, in my project folder. It's in the correct coordinate system, and I've added all my fields, so I'll click OK. And I have my new empty trees layer. So for this, I'm going to give it to show you how you can quickly make like a target symbol in QGIS. QGIS has quite a few symbology options. So I'm going to select this simple marker, and so I'm going to make this have a stroke color that's bright red. And I'm going to give it a fill color that is transparent, so it becomes a ring. And then I'm going to up the stroke width to 0.6, and I'm going to increase the size to 4. So I have a big ring. And then I'm going to click the add symbol layer, and I'm going to choose a cross icon down here. I'm going to make this the same red color. Give it the same stroke width. Then I'm just going to increase the size up to maybe something like 8, so that it kind of has that target kind of appearance for where my points are recorded. So with that, I'll go ahead and save my project. Okay, so next what I want to show you how to do is, if you're in the situation where you anticipate being out in the field and being outside of cellular range. The important thing to know is that the GPS on a mobile phone or a tablet will still operate as long as you have clear sky view, even if your cellular connection is out. So you can still collect data even if you're not within a cellular network. And another thing to mention about just data collection with phones in general is that you can also attach third-party Bluetooth GPS receivers and pair them with your phone. So if you need increased accuracy, that's always a good option. There's several commonly used brands of Bluetooth GPS receivers that you can pair with your phone, and Input lets you choose which receiver you're going to be using when you're collecting data. So that's works well. So here, what I want to do is create some offline versions of both these base maps. And so to do that, I'm going to be using the creating MB-tile files for these. So one thing to set first is it's best to set the size of your XYZ tile layer to 256 by 256 so that the labels are more readable when you're on your mobile device or one that has a really high resolution display. So to do this for my Bing imagery, for example, I can right click on it and go to properties. And I'm going to go to the symbology, no, the source tab. So on the source tab of layer properties for my XYZ tile layer, I can, for the tile resolution, instead of unknown, I can set this to 256 by 256 DPI. And that will be better for most mobile phones. So I'll go ahead and click OK for that, and I'll check the OpenStreetMap and make sure that that's the same. It's also unknown. So I'll set this to standard and click OK. Another thing that's useful at this stage, there's the plugin called Zoom Level. And this plugin will display the zoom level of your current map in the status bar down at the bottom of QGIS. And this can help when generating the MB-tile files because it asks for that specific zoom level. So this is when I'm talking about zoom level, I'm referring to the zoom levels that are used in online web maps like Google Maps that range between 0, which is a global scale, to 20, which is zoomed into, you know, a city street corner. And so the zoom level plugin is really helpful, I find. So I'm going to go to the plugins menu, choose manage and install plugins. And I already have this one installed, but you can go to the all tab and search for zoom and find the zoom level plugin here. I'm just going to enable the one that I have turned on, click close. And so now the pan, you can see it says my zoom level now is 17.78. So remember that 20 would be zoomed in to the maximum that the XYZ tile service has, the maximum resolution. So 18 is just a couple stops below that. So now what I'm going to do is open up the processing toolbox. Now that I know that I can probably get away with zoom levels 18 to 20, I don't have to build zoom levels all the way back to some coarser scale. And I'm going to search the toolbox for MB-tiles. And you can see that there's generate XYZ tiles, MB-tiles here. So I'm going to open up this processing algorithm. And one thing I want to do is turn off my other layers. So I'm going to do this one layer at a time. So I'm going to start with just OpenStreetMap because this tool will generate XYZ tiles of your entire map. And I just want MB-tile files for this specific base map, not the study area too. So I'm going to, for the extent, choose use current map canvas extent. And then I'm going to set the minimum and maximum zoom. So my minimum zoom is going to be 18. maximum zoom 20. I'll leave the DPI and all these other arguments as the default, and then I'm going to save this as an MB tiles file into my project folder. So I'm going to call this OSM offline and click run. So you can see it's generating tiles at level 18, 19, and then 20. So I can click close and I can open up Windows Explorer to see what that created. So it created an MB tiles file that's only 4 megabytes. So that's pretty good. I find that it's best to keep these as small as possible, which is why it's important to pay attention to that zoom level and not to include too many, because that can blow up the size of the MB tile file. And so normally, below 25 megabytes is desirable, just because the processing power of a mobile device gets limited beyond that. And this still gives me plenty of detail. So I can now add this to my map. Hit refresh. Here's my new MB tile file. And I can turn off the original, and I can see that well, let me do that. Let me generate the other one first. So I've got one MB tile file. So now I'm going to turn on the Bing imagery, and I'm just going to repeat the process. I'm going to choose the current map canvas extent. The imagery is bigger data than the OpenStreetMap. So here I'm just going to choose a zoom between 18 and 19. Including a zoom up to 20 will greatly increase the size of the MB tiles file. So I think I'm just going with the idea that a scale of 19 will give me enough detail out in the field to have this serve as a base map. And then I'm going to save it to another MB tile file, and I'll call this Bing offline. And click run. And so you can see the Bing file, even though I only used scales 18 and 19, is still double the size of the OSM that went from 18 to 20. So if I had specified this to go up to level 20, it would be quite a bit bigger. And I just want to avoid that. So I'm going to now add that one. And now if I turn off the original XYZ, I just have the MB tiles on, and you can see if I pan and zoom now, you can see it's tied to just my map extent. So now what I can do is create map themes. And so map themes are used in QGIS for a number of reasons. They're really useful for creating a locator map. So when you're creating a print layout and you're going to have your main map and then a locator map for where you're looking in the world, you will often set a map theme for each one of those. So a map theme basically defines which layers in your project are going to participate in the map. So here, what I'm going to do is turn on trees, my study area, and the OpenStreetMap. And I'm going to click on the map theme menu at the top of the layers panel, and I'm going to choose add theme. I'm going to call this OSM online, since this is the XYZ tile layer. I'll then toggle that off and toggle the OSM offline map, and I'll create another map theme called OSM offline. So now I have two different map themes. I have offline and online. And so as I toggle those, it will determine which layers are turned on. And I can do the same thing for the Bing imagery. being online. Being offline. So now I've got 4 map themes that I can use. And so this will help me when I'm out in the field to choose whether I want OpenStreetMap or satellite imagery as my background, and then an offline version of each in case I encounter bad connectivity. Okay, so I mentioned that in input, it's useful to distinguish between your survey layer and your background layers. So we do that from project properties. So I'm going to go to the project menu and open up properties. So here I'm going to switch to the data sources tab. So I have all my layers listed here, and I can choose for my survey layer, such as my study area, or my background layer, such as my study area. I can make that read only. So that will just tell input that that is not a layer that I can collect data into. It's just there to just delineate my study area, and trees will be the one layer that is writable. So in input, it's also possible to identify features. And in this case, I'm probably only going to want to identify my trees. So I can uncheck these boxes and just make trees the only identifiable layer. And I'm also going to make it the only searchable layer. So you can set up how you want input to relate to your different layers here in this data sources tab. So click apply. Look at my notes for a second. Yes. So in the Mergent Maps input app on your phone, there's an option to zoom to the project extent. And if it's not set, Mergent Maps input will zoom to all the visible layers. And this isn't very convenient when you have a global layer like OpenStreetMap or Bing Imagery, because all of a sudden it will zoom to the whole world and you're only surveying a couple blocks in this case. So we can constrain the extent to the current canvas extent so that input, when you choose zoom to project extent, it just zooms to the extent of your study area, basically. So I'm going to go to the view settings tab here, and I can set the project extent here. So I can define a project extent that's different than that defined by my layer extents. So I'm going to tell it that I want the map canvas extent to be the project extent. And I'll click OK. So those are 2 nice project settings to create when you're using input. There's also a feature in the input app on your mobile phone that allows you to browse for features. So you can, if we're going to do a tree survey, when we're outside, we can actually browse the different trees that we've collected. And by default, when you browse, you'll just see a summary of the table with all the data. But we can set up an expression that will be a little more informative. So we're going to collect the name of the tree, the type of tree, and also the date that it was collected. So we can create an expression so that when we're browsing, instead of just displaying a table of data, it will say apple tree surveyed on June 22nd, 2022, or something like that. So to set that, and this isn't something that was required, this is just a nice little setting that I want to share with you. Won't be needed for every survey project, but I set this in the layer properties for my survey layer. So I'm going to go to the display tab. And so by default, the display name is just the tree species field. but I'm going to click this expression button to open up the expression window. And I'm going to add to this. So I'm going to hit this concatenation operator, which allows me to add another piece of text. And then I'm going to type in a single tick, which is what you do when you are entering text into an expression in QGIS. And I'll say surveyed on and another single tick. And I'm going to add a space on either side of that. So the result will read like a real sentence. I'm then going to click the concatenation operator, and I'm going to find the date column from our layer. So I'm going to go into fields and values. And here's the fields that I added, and double click on date. So when I browse now, it would say tree species, whatever that is, like an oak tree surveyed on whatever the date was. And I can also go in here and use a format date function so that that date is formatted the way I want to read it. So I can use the search box to find the format date function. I'm going to put my cursor right before the date field, double click on format date. And here I'm going to, I can look at the syntax for this. So the format date function takes a date time. So that's my date right here. And then a comma, and the second argument is the format. And there's all these formatting tags that you can use to specify how you want the day, the month, and the year shown. So I'm going to use the DD, which is the day as a number with a leading 0, and then a dash, and then capital MM, which is the month as a number with a leading 0, another dash, and then 4 Ys for a four number date with a closing tick and a closing parenthesis. So when I get onto the mobile phone at the end of the course, we'll see where this appears on the mobile phone, and if that's something you want to set for your surveys or not. Again, it's an optional step. Okay, so we've done the basic QGIS project, and what we're going to focus on for the next little bit is setting up the field form for our survey layer. So we're going to go into the layer properties for our trees layer again, and we're going to be working on the attributes form tab. So this allows you to specify how the data in different fields appears. And so we can set up some nice things here for a field survey. So for example, this FID field is simply the feature ID that is part of the GeoPackage format. And we don't really need to see that when we're out collecting data. It's just part of the file format. So here I can choose a widget type of hidden. So that will get written every time a tree is collected, but we don't have to see it. The next one in the list here is tree species. So another nice thing we can do in these field forms is we can set an alias. So instead of it just being tree_species, we can have a question for the data collector. So you can make it a little more intuitive. So I can, for an alias type, enter the tree species. Just a little prompt. And this will be a widget type of text edit, which is the default for text. And that's fine. So I'll leave that. But I will point out that there's a constraint section here too. So if this is a required field, you can check not null in the constraint section. And this option is available for, I think, all the widgets. So if not null is checked, the data collector has to enter a value before the point can be saved. So if you have required fields, you can use that not null constraint. There's also this option for multi-line. So I think I'll use that when I get to the notes section, which would allow someone to type multiple lines of text into the field. And there's also this default section. So if you know, for example, that the area that you're going to be surveying is full of oak trees, you could enter a default value of oak in that section there. The next one is tree type. So this is going to be, I'm going to show you how to set up basically a pick list. So this is going to be choosing between deciduous or evergreen. So I'm going to use a value map instead of text edit. And a value map allows you to load a number of choices. And so the data collector will just basically see a drop-down list and they choose which one it is. So that's obviously good because it avoids typos and data collection errors. So I'm going to type in deciduous here for choice number 1. I can put the same value in value and description. Then I'll type in evergreen for the second choice. And you can put in as many choices as you need in this situation, but I'm just going to use those 2. And I can also enter an alias here, deciduous or evergreen question mark. Okay. The next one is fruit tree. So this is remember this was a Boolean field. It's just a yes or no answer. So I can just, for the alias, put in fruit tree question mark. And this checkbox is the default type for Boolean fields, and that should work well. This is going to display the checkbox as true or false. You have you can also store your own unique values for the 2 choices, but true or false works for this situation. Next is circumference, and so this will be this is kind of a specific measurement in this case. This is it's going to be like a forestry survey. So for the alias, I'm going to tell the data collectors, gives them some instructions. Measure the circumference at 1.3 meters above ground in centimeters. So they know exactly what to do. And since this is a numeric field, I can use a range widget. And a range widget is, there's several different types. There's editable, where you can just enter a number. There's a slider, which will, on the phone, the data collector will have a numeric slider that goes back and forth and allows them to pick the number. And the dial is basically a dial that operates the same way. And let's see, on the Mergent Maps website, they have some really good documentation. I'll put this into the chat, this URL. So this page on the Mergent Maps documentation goes through all of these widgets and kind of gives you a visual example of what each one looks like. So this is what that slider would look like. And I guess they don't show you the dial here, but it's just a little round dial that you can probably imagine. So these are all the different kinds of widgets that you can use in QGIS. So if you want to refer to those, you can. So I'm going to use just the editable default option, but I'm going to put in my own values here. So do these. So I'm going to enter what I expect to encounter as the full range. So I'm going to have a maximum of 1,000. It's a very large tree, and a minimum of 5. And then you can set the step. So I can have it go every whole number, but I'm going to enter, make it 0.5 in this case. So this will constrain the user so they can only enter a number between 5 and 1,000 in steps of 1/2. Okay, the next field is photograph. So for the alias, I can just have a prompt, take a photo. And this is going to be a widget type of attachment. And there's a number of choices here. I usually like to store the path as relative to the project path. And there's this section that's important when you're going to be setting up photographs. There's this integrated document viewer. And instead of the type being no content, we're going to change that to image. So this will allow QGIS, when you're using the identify features tool, for example, to click on a point and in form view of identify results, you'll see the actual photograph of the tree in this case, if you set up your photograph widget this way. So attachment with relative paths and the integrated document viewer is type image. Next is date. So you can set the file for basically format the date, how you'd like that to appear. I'm going to use the default for this. I think that would work well. But one thing I can do is use the default section down here. QGIS has a function called now, and I can just enter that now function. And you can see it brings up the current date and time right there. And so this will mean that QGIS will automatically pick the current date and time, and the data collector just has to confirm that. So it cuts down on the amount of work. Then the notes section, you can just type enter any notes as the alias. I'll leave the widget type as text edit, and I'll make this multi-line so there's more room to enter longer notes. And then finally, we get to collector. So we've seen examples of why you might use most of the arguments in here. Here we have another option for default value. So I could just enter my name. And again, I want it surrounded by single ticks since it's text. And that could just serve as the default value. But there's another option here. There are margin variables. So I have a slide here, and this will be in your documentation too. There's a number of margin variables that come with the plugin. So for example, I could put in margin username, which in my case is GeoMenki. That's my handle for my account. So I could use that as the default for this, and it would populate it with that. So there are other margin variables in here, such as the margin URL, margin project name. So you can use those for any widgets that you need just when you're setting up your data collection form. And I should also mention now that there's also these position variables. Now these are input variables. These are recognized by input on your mobile phone. But I could have added a field called GPS accuracy. And for the default value, I could have used position horizontal accuracy. And I could have used this variable as the default. And QGIS doesn't recognize these, but input, which is writing the data, does. So you can use these as default values for different fields. So there's a lot of nice ones: latitude, longitude, altitude, direction, ground speed, horizontal and vertical accuracy. So all of these could be used to add extra columns with default values to collect that kind of data. So here, what I'm going to do, instead of just putting in my name, I'm going to enter the my Mergin, use the Mergin username variable. That. And I'm not signed up into Mergin yet, so it doesn't recognize it, but it will once I have installed the plugin and signed in. Okay, so I can click OK on this and save my edits. And another thing that can make your field form nice, especially if you have a lot of questions or a long survey that you're working with, is to create, use the drag and drop designer to break your questions into different groups, into different tabs, essentially. So I can do that from the same attribute form view here in layer properties. Where it says auto generate here, I can choose this drag and drop designer. And this is just a feature of QGIS. This is nothing specific to Mergin Maps. You can set up any project with these widgets or using the drag and drop designer. And so what I can do is click the green plus to add a new tab or a new container. And I'm going to call this tree info. I'll click OK. So now I have a new tab called tree info. And so I can drag tree species, tree type, fruit tree, circumference, and let's say photograph underneath that. And then I can click to add another one and call this other info. And I can put the date, notes, and collector under that. And for FID, I don't really need to see it, so I can just remove that from this form layout. I'm not removing it from the data set, I'm just not making it visible on the form layout. So I can click OK. So let me show you what this might look like if you haven't used this before. So if I put my tree layer into edit mode and I start adding a point, I'm going to get my data basically in this form view with these two tabs that I just set up so that I could enter the tree species, and I'll see the widgets in action here too. So I can now choose deciduous or evergreen. I can enter a number here. I don't have a photograph handy, but you can see how these widgets and drag and drop designer work. There's the current date, enter any notes, collector. I don't have, it would put my name in there if I had the plugin installed and configured. So I can click OK, and now I have that. And this same kind of form view can be used when you're looking at an attribute table. So if I open up the attribute table for this now, down in the lower right-hand corner of the attribute table, the default view is this table view, but I could switch to form view. And now I'll see that form. And now you're seeing that browse expression as well. Apple tree surveyed on, da, 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 da. That's when I entered that into layer properties on the display tab. That's how where that shows up here. So I'm going to back out and not save my edit there, but I wanted to show you how those, how that works. So let's see, we're at the top of the hour. Why don't we take a 10-minute break and for coffee and a bathroom break, and we'll come back at 10 after the hour. And I'll stay on if you have any questions you can ask. Okay, we'll go ahead and start up here again. Is everyone back? Okay, Natalia's back. Jimmy, are you there? wait a moment for Jimmy here. Jimmy, are you back yet? If you don't mind, Natalia, just wait another minute or two for Jimmy to come back. We are actually ahead of schedule, so we still have time to get through everything. Okay, so I have my web browser up on the screen now, so hopefully everyone can see that. I'm open to the Mergin Maps page, and I'm logged into my account on Mergin Maps. So the URL for this page is apps.merginmaps.com. They actually, Lutra Consulting just did a complete rebranding of this stack. So Mergin Maps is a new name that's just started in May. Before that, it was just the input app and the Mergin plugin, and so now they've kind of rebranded everything. So now it's the Mergin Maps input app, the Mergin Maps QGIS plugin, and Mergin Maps with a new logo and everything. But I'm logged into my account, and so you can see my username, and here's my projects that I'm on. And so you can see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 projects here. And the most recent one was updated a month ago. This is actually for my Discover QGIS 3X book, the second edition that's coming out. There's a chapter in there on field data collection. So that's what this most recent project is from. But I just want to show you that, we're going to look at this after I install the plugin and create a Mergin Maps project from what I've done and upload it. And so we'll see the new project. And so everything we've done so far has pretty much been almost entirely just QGIS functionality. Not a lot of Mergin Maps so far. So a lot of the basic configuration of a project are things that you can just do in QGIS. And so a lot of these things, if you haven't done them before, are useful for other workflows too. So setting up form widgets and using the drag and drop designer, for example, are really useful for lots of workflows. So it's one nice thing about learning how to do this is you learn some good QGIS skills that you can use in other areas as well. But for any one of these projects, I can click on a project and I can see the files that are part of that project. And I can also look at the history of a project. So I can see that Mergin keeps track of different versions of a project. So I could download version 5 of this project, for example. So you can do some version management in here, which is nice. There's also settings for each project in Mergin that allow you to, for example, invite collaborators here. So you could, they have to have an account, but the accounts are free. So that's not a big hurdle. And you can invite people to participate in your data collection form, and you can then grant them different kinds of access. You can basically give them different permissions. So you can kind of make some people read only, some write only, some read only on one survey layer, but not the other. You can set all of that up in here. You can also choose the status of your project. So there, this one I made public. They're all private by default. This one, since it was part of my book, I made this a public project, which is why there's an option to make it private again. I can delete a project, transfer a project, clone a project, all these things. And so what we've done so far is really been the most robust way to set up a project with the most options that I've shown you. But what I've shown you isn't the easiest way to go. You can see right here, there's a button, create. You can create a basic data collection project right in Mergin with just a few settings. So that is one quick way to just create a very fast project for data collection, is right from Mergin Maps. So I'm going to get back into QGIS, and I'm going to turn on the Mergin Maps plugin. I already have this one installed. I'm just going to turn it on, but you'll install it like any other plugin to search for it, Mergin, and install it. So there I've installed, or I've turned on Mergin. So I'll close the plugin manager, and I'll see Mergin in a few areas. This is the Mergin toolbar here. If I go to the browser panel, I'll see Mergin Maps appear as a data provider, and it tells me not configured. That means I haven't logged in to the plugin yet. And I also see it from the plugins menu. So it appears in a few places. And so what I need to do is right click on this and choose configure to log into my account. And click OK. So you can now see the same 7 projects that you saw online show up here. None of these I have locally. So, but if I wanted one, for example, my DQ3X tree survey, I could right click on this and download it or clone it or remove it from the server. So you can manage projects in your Mergin account from here. What I'm going to do is save my project, because I've done all the configuration that I need to do. So namely, everything is in the same course demo folder. You know, I can hover over all these layers and see that they're all in the same folder. So that's the most important thing. And that includes my QGIS project file. So what I can do now is click this Create Mergin Maps Project, the plus button here, and you'll get this window that pops up. So this is another place. I just showed you from the Mergin Maps webpage. You can create a project from there. You can also just create a new basic project with the Mergin plugin in QGIS. So I could have just a brand new empty project in QGIS. I could open up the Mergin Maps plugin and tell it to create a new basic QGIS project. So that's another, again, it won't be as flexible as what I've shown you, but it's a quicker way to go. I'm going to use this final option, use current QGIS project as is, because I've set this project up exactly as it needs to be set up to work with Mergin Maps. It's all in the same folder. I have a different geo package for my survey layer, and the QGIS project's in the same folder as well. So I'm going to click use current project as is, and then I'm going to give it a name. Let me see, I'll just call it course demo June. and there's the map to my project folder, and then I'll click finish. So it's going to basically package this up and upload it to my cloud account. My data was small enough that it happened pretty fast. So now I can bring this up, go to my projects, and here's the project online that I just published, updated 0 minutes ago. And so if I click on this, you can see the MB tile files that I created, my QGIS project file, and my study area geopackage and my trees geopackage. Okay, so now let me set up my Android phone to be shareable online here. Give me a second. Okay, so here is my mobile phone. This is just a control panel on the left side of this AirDroid Cast that I'm using, but this is my phone. So I can click on my folder that I keep mapping apps in, and here I have the input app. So I'm going to click on that, and Merge in Maps opens on my phone. And what I'm going to do is click on projects down here to go to my projects page. Where is it? Let's see. Let me refresh. Ah, here we go. Okay, so you can see now there's my course demo June that I just created, and it has a little download link. So that indicates that it's not on my phone. So I'm going to press that download button, and it will download the project from the cloud to my phone. And now I can just click on course demo June, and it will open up my project on my phone here. So I'm inside. This is the accuracy of my GPS right now. I'm actually surprised it's that high. I'm close to a window, but I'm indoors, so my accuracy is not what it normally would be. One thing, yeah, that's what I would expect, more like 10 or 20. So I can press on that number that gives me my GPS accuracy, and it will open up this GPS info page, which will give you your latitude, longitude, and your current accuracy, the number of satellites you're hooked up to, and things like that. You can also click on here, manage GPS receivers. And I'm using my internal GPS receiver, but you can connect to another receiver there. Just go back. If I click on the GPS button, that will just zoom me into my current position or center the map on my current position. And if I want to toggle, remember I set up those map themes for offline and online. So maybe I want to use the Bing imagery now. So I could click on this more button down here, bring up this menu, and I could click on the map themes option. And it has the 4 map themes that I set up in QGIS. So I could choose Bing online, and now it will switch to the aerial photograph. I could go back and choose Bing offline. Now it's using the MB tile file on my phone. So you can switch between map themes here as you want to. Remember, I also set the extent for my project to be the map canvas extent. So I can click on this zoom to project and it will just zoom to my study area. And I can also just pinch with my hands and zoom in as well. So you have most of your options listed in this menu here. So if I want to record a tree location, I obviously don't have any trees in my office here, but I'm going to pretend I do. I'm just going to click this record button. And I'm getting this warning that I have low GPS position accuracy, but that's what I expect. But you'll see down here, my one survey layer is showing up. If I had multiple layers, like a street center line layer, it would let me choose which layer I was going to collect data into at this point. But I'll just select trees. That's my one active layer. And then what I can do is click this add point button to start collecting a tree location. So I click that add point, and this opens up my feature form. So I've got my two tabs, tree info and other info here, like I set up in QGIS. So I can enter the tree species, maple, deciduous, drop-down box, fruit tree, false, circumference, I don't know, let's say 35. I'm just making this up. Take a photo. So take a photo, you can choose a picture from your gallery, or you can take a live photo. I'm just going to take a photo out my window here. And there are trees in the picture at least. Click OK. So there's my picture. I can go to the other info tab. You can see the date is there. I set the now function is the default, so it's already the correct date. And then I can just type in course demo as the notes, and then it's recognizing my data collector name because I put in the variable Mergin username. So that's my Mergin username that shows up automatically. And if I want to save my point, I click this save button up here when I'm done. So obviously when you're actually collecting data, it's good to be, in this case, very close to the tree to get the most accurate point. Click save. And now I have one point collected. So I'm just going to go back to my projects menu here, that left button. And now that I've collected a point, you can see that there's a refresh icon next to my course demo June. So I can click the refresh button. And now I've synchronized my project with the Mergin cloud. So I can bring back up Mergin here and I'll hit refresh. And let me go ahead and click on this project now and go to the history. So you can see there was version 1 and version 2 the version 1 was the one I uploaded from QGIS. Version 2 is creating the new point on my phone. So you can see I added one feature here. So now I can bring up QGIS. And this is one of the nicest things about Mergin. It checks all the time for the changes to the project. So it already knows this refresh button is now active because it knows that there's changes to the project on the Mergin cloud that are not local. So I can click this synchronize Mergin Maps project button, and it tells me that there's a JPEG and a change to the trees geopackage. And I'll click sync. And there's my new point that I just collected. So I can now click on the identify features button on that and see all the data that I just entered. And if I click on view feature form, I'll actually see the photograph that I took out the window there. So it's that easy. It's that easy. I could also go in here and add a point for a tree over here and say this is an oak tree. Blah, blah, blah. Click OK. Add another tree there. And now I could synchronize this and tell it to insert the one new record. Now, if I go back up to the merge in cloud, I can see there's now another version of my project here that I just made in QGIS. And so I can bring back up my phone, refresh the list. I actually haven't tried this. Oh, there we go. On the right. So there's course demo June on my projects, has the refresh icon because I made a change on the QGIS side and it's not on my phone. So I can click that to download it, open up the project, zoom out, and I can see the other point that I added from QGIS. So you can do this both ways now that you have, once you have this Merge in Maps project, it will recognize changes from your phone or in QGIS, and you can just use the synchronization tool to go back and forth with that project and keep everything up to sync on both sides. It's pretty slick, I think.
That's really cool. Can I ask a question on that just so I understand?
Yeah, absolutely.
So say like you're in the field and you forgot to add a base layer that would be useful. You could have somebody back at the office update the project with that layer, and then you could sync it in the field and it would show up in your input project.
Yeah, I think so. I actually haven't tried that, to be honest with you, but I think we could, let's see, I could go and add another base map like Google Terrain and save my project and synchronize it. And I'll bring up my phone. Synchronize it. Open the project. I don't know if I should have set up a map theme for it. Hold on, I should have, to make that easy to prove. So let me, okay, so now. Yeah, so now it has the terrain map theme that I just added. So yeah, the answer is yes. The one thing you don't want to, the one thing you want to avoid is, well, you could add other survey layers actually. Since every survey layer, that's one important reason why every survey layer should be in its own geo package. Someone could add a new survey layer, like street center lines to this project and or manhole covers and upload that. And it shouldn't cause any problems as long as it's in its own geo package separate from the other. Yeah, so it's a pretty slick system just for syncing projects back and forth. In fact, I've used it simply to get somebody a project, because I can go up here and I can just create a project, upload it to Merge in Maps, and I could just share this with someone. I could share this project and have them access it from here and just download it as a QGIS project, whether they're even collecting data or not. So it's kind of interesting from that perspective, I think. There's also in here, so yeah, there's a shared with me. If someone shared a project with me, it would show up there. And in Explore, these are all, well, there's over 2,000 now. It's getting kind of unwieldy, but these are just projects that have been made public by different users that are out there, and you could download any of those. One of the nice things that Lutra has done with their documentation is, so this is the main page for their documentation. I'll put it in the chat. It's going to be in your step-by-step instructions anyway, but their documentation is incredibly thorough. And for a lot of the examples that they have, they will give you a link to a QGIS project that has that setup configured in it already, so you can look at it. So for example, if I go into where are the fieldwork tips, where is it? How to attach multiple photos to features. If you want to take more than one photo, there's a little article on how to do this. And then you can clone this project to have an example of that being done and see how it works. So very handy. And their documentation has been worked on substantially and is very good. So if there's a question that you have about how to do something slightly more advanced, it's probably in here somewhere. So for example, how to stake out points. So it's possible to use this to navigate to your survey points out in the field. So there's this little icon in the input app, and you can basically use this to, within the app, to navigate to that point and then collect data. Another common thing people want to do is, like if you're doing a manhole survey over time, the manholes aren't moving. You just may want to go back to that manhole and collect the same data every month. And so you don't want to go there and hold your phone over that manhole every month and have all these little clustered points that are based on your GPS accuracy that are kind of around that manhole. You just want a single point with multiple fields attached to it from each data collection effort. So there's a workflow for doing that in here, how to link multiple records to one feature. So all of those sorts of things are possible. Some of these like this take a little more preparation, but they have pretty clear instructions on here for how to do that. Let's see. So also, if I go back into QGIS and go to my Merge in Maps plugin and go to my projects, this is the one that I just created. It has a folder because it's local. And if I expand this, it'll show me the contents of my project with the one photograph that I took. This .mergein folder lives in there and is part of has some files in there that help keep track of the synchronization.
With regard to those photos, what's the best way to keep track of what points those are associated with? Is there something in the file name there, or
Yeah, so if I open up the attributes for my trees, you can see the aliases here are showing up in my attribute column. But there's in the photograph field, it has the JPEG name. So this is the photos by default get downloaded right next to your project file. So if I open up my folder where this all lives, you can see this is my QGIS project file, and that's the JPEG that I took out my window. So it's sitting right there with your project file. So just having the name of the JPEG in a field is enough for you to be able to do things like use the identify features in form view to be able to see the photograph. So the photo is a separate JPEG, but kind of using standard GIS linking to be able to see the pop-up with the photo when you identify features, for example. But that's how you would know which photograph is attached to each feature, because you have your FID and then the name of that JPEG.
Gotcha. And what was the file size of those photos on Mergin?
Oh, well, this
Or
JPEG is 3.5 megabytes.
right.
But how much space do you get on Mergin?
Yeah, you said it was because it's 100 megabytes with the.
Yeah, let's look at their page on that. Where's that? There it is.
I'm just trying to consider how fast photos would suck up storage
Mhm.
space there.
For free. Looking for
I
that.
can figure this out later too. There it is.
There it is. There's
Just
their pricing.
Googling.
Yeah. So here's their pricing scheme.
Right.
So yeah, 100 megabytes. So you can also specify now the quality of the image. I know I just saw that on a tweet last week. It's a new feature and input somewhere where you can set the resolution of the photo that gets stored. So you could take a lower res photograph to save space, but you get 100 megabytes with the free setup. And then the next tier is 1 gigabyte. And one thing I should also point out is that Lutra has also open sourced Mergin maps. So it's possible for you to install your own Mergin map server on your own server and just be completely separated from them and just manage your own server. And at that point, it's free and you don't have to worry about a license subscription. So I think it's pretty nice that they've done that. So if people have security issues or just want to manage their own server, that's completely possible.
Yeah, I kind of have a question related to that. I don't want to derail you too much though. So if you want to save it to the end, we can. But
That's fine.
I did have a question. Our organization stores all our geodata in a Postgres database.
Yeah.
And, I think in an ideal world, we'd be able to connect our field data from Mergin maps to our Postgres database.
Mhm.
It's starting to get a little bit out of my technical expertise here on the back end, but is there workflow or process? Look at that.
Yep. It is possible. So yeah, it's entirely doable to use Postgres instead of geo packages.
Cool. I will look into that further with some other folks I work with. Thank you.
Mhm. Okay, so that's pretty much it. We've covered the entire workflow. So if there are more questions, feel free to ask. I do have a couple more basically shameless plug slides and just some information about your assignment and the resources again. So the assignment I'll be sending out in the next hour or so to you. I'm going to upload this recording to YouTube. I'll send you the link, the step-by-step instructions, which have links to the different YouTube videos on different tasks. Like there'll be there's a YouTube video on setting project properties, or one for how to use the Mergin Maps plugin. So each individual step has a little video. And so I'll be sending all of that to you when this is finished. And so what I'm going to have you do for the assignment is basically go replicate this kind of tree survey somewhere around your house or your office in the next week. And then you will just send me this document where I ask for 3 specific screenshots just to show that you've done that. And then we'll have the question answer period next week. So if any questions come up over the next week as you're working on this, we can cover any of those issues next week during the question and answer period. So I encourage you to try to go through most of this before next week. So if you do run into questions, we have time to cover them. And then by I think I set the 27th as a date that I would like the assignment turned into me. Of course, if you run into some issue and you can't get it to me by then, just let me know. I'm sure I can be a little flexible on that, but would like to have it by then. And then once you've turned in your assignment, I'll be sending you your official QGIS certificate for the course. And just to let you know, I do have some other online courses. One of the things I really do a lot of work on is data visualization with QGIS. So I have a class that focuses just on data visualization. It's 2 2-hour sessions. So it's a total of 6 hours with question and answer sessions. And I cover things like working with blending modes, special cartographic effects, working in 3D, using the new temporal controller in QGIS, which is amazingly powerful, doing visualizations of layer effects and some of the different renderers that QGIS has. So that's the sole focus of this course, is just all the amazing visualizations you can do with QGIS. And the next one starts in September. And then I have a raster data course. So this is a course that just covers doing a spatial analysis, basically a site selection analysis with raster data in QGIS. So the case study is trying to identify potential vineyard sites, but all the other workflows are generic to lots of things. We're going to learn how to do terrain analysis, reclassify raster data, use the raster calculator in several ways, and kind of produce the final result. And that one is in November. So yeah, I guess that's my last slide. I also just should mention that the second edition of my book, Discover QGIS, I just finished last week. It's not quite printed yet. The cover is being prepared, but there's going to be a new edition of this book coming out that's current to 326 and includes a chapter on field data collection too. So if you know anyone who might be interested in that, let them know. So we have, a few moments left. We have like 10 minutes. If you have any other questions now.
Yeah, thanks, Kurt. This is really pretty impressive. I'm grateful for your time. The only question I was wondering if you could go over is within the input app, connecting to like an external receiver and then modifying settings like point averaging. I was just wondering if you could do a quick demo on that if you're able, because like some of the Esri products, you have to connect to another third-party app in order to connect to the external receiver, and it's kind of a rigmarole. So I was wondering what that process looked like for input.
Come on. Let me reconnect here. So with the GPS receiver, I think it can work either way. You can certainly just have a Bluetooth receiver connected to your, oh, I have to share my screen. I forgot a little detail here. Oh, no, you can see my screen, yeah? No, you can't.
No,
Okay. So here I have my phone open with input, and the one place I know to do that is clicking, once you have a project open, clicking on this GPS accuracy estimation down here. And that brings up the GPS info page in general. But then there's this manage GPS receivers button below. And so you can click on that to connect to a new receiver. I don't have one to connect to show you right now, but that's what you would do. I don't know what it brings up. It's going to be looking for a Bluetooth device, but I don't have one for it to find. So that's all there is to it within input itself. And the question about point averaging is a good one. I'm not sure about that. This is the settings menu. I'm just browsing. I'm gonna have to look that one up.
sounds good.
It's a good question.
Thanks. That's all I had. Again, I'm really grateful you continued this course, even though there was only the two of us. This was really, really useful. I see us trying to implement this ASAP. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. So where are you based, Jimmy?
We're in St. Paul, Minnesota, United States.
Yep.
Private consulting firm, do a lot of environmental field work,
Okay.
and been trying to transition from kind of antiquated survey equipment to mobile devices, and then going all of our desktop GIS runs open source